It was on the day World War II ended, and everyone in Australia celebrated with relief that nearly 6 years of conflict had come to a close with the surrender of the Japanese army on the 15th of August 1945. Because of this, school was cancelled that day. That morning at 11:30, 8-year-old Valerie Eastwell had been playing with children in a neighbour's house opposite her home in Gol Gol, New South Wales, a small community on the banks of the Murray River, opposite Mildura in Victoria. She had left when she became hungry to go and visit relatives at Mildura. She never arrived. Valerie was born in 1937, the youngest of 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, of George, a woodcutter, and Beatrice Eastwell. She had a freckled face and auburn hair. At the time of her disappearance she stood 3'6" and was of a thin build. When she was nervous her right eye would blink uncontrollably. When last seen she was wearing a navy blue school tunic, grey cardigan jacket, and black shoes. As she frequently visited relatives, her parents did not notice her absence and became anxious until nightfall. At 8 p.m. they began looking for her and notified police first thing Thursday morning. At first it was assumed the girl had simply wandered off and become lost in the bush. One report was that she looked ill on the day she went missing, and it was thought she may have followed other children, got lost and crawled under a bush to rest. Wentworth and Mildura police formed search parties numbering 300 when they were made aware of Valerie's disappearance, including an Aboriginal tracker. Carloads of volunteers drove around in a radius of 15 miles from Gol Gol in the first 48 hours. 2 Royal Australian Air Force planes covered several hundred square miles from Gol Gol to Wentworth. Tracks were located by the tracker in dry country around Lake Gol Gol on Friday the 17th of August, and followed for 5 miles before it became too dark to continue. Fires were then lit in the hope that Valerie would see them and come to them. Due to the end of the war, the lights of Gol Gol were lit up at night for the first time since the attack on Pearl Harbor, and could be seen for 15 miles, and it was hoped that they could guide her in if she was wandering around disorientated. The area around Gol Gol was chiefly scrub and sandhills, with some swampy ground. On Saturday, Mildura police announced that they were still hopeful Valerie would be found safe and well that day. Ominously they added that if not, they would presume she was dead and begin dragging the river. With no sign of Valerie, police dragged the Murray for 8 miles on Sunday, the 19th of August, but again not a trace of the little girl was found. By Monday the search party had grown to 1,000 people, including several hundred Air Force personnel from the local base. Despite their earlier grim forecast, police said they still held a slight hope that Valerie would be found alive. After she was missing a week, the thought that Valerie had been the victim of a crime became the foremost theory. The trackers were withdrawn, as searchers had obliterated any chance of tracks being found now, and New South Wales detectives were joining the local police. 300 searchers on foot, on horseback, and in cars continued the desperate hunt over more than 100 square miles. On Saturday the 25th of August, with not a trace of Valerie found, the search was officially ended. It was now considered most likely she had been abducted. Some more tracks found northwest of Gol Gol, and some blood-stained clothing raised expectations that an answer might be forthcoming, but the tracks led nowhere, and the clothing was proved not to belong to Valerie. New South Wales police dogs Zoe and Suri were dispatched to the area on the 28th of August to assist in the investigation. They too met with failure. The arrival of Detective Inspector James Wiley from Sydney signalled that the belief was Valerie was dead, as Wiley was well known as an expert in investigating homicides. A report that a girl matching Valerie's description was seen at a rotunda in Deakin Avenue, Mildura, at 2:30 p.m. on the 15th of August was checked, but led nowhere. Reports came in belatedly on the 31st of August that motorists had heard a child scream on the edge of Swan Hill Road, 14 miles from Mildura, on the day Valerie vanished. The driver was sure the screams were made by a child, but his 2 passengers were not convinced. One thought it was the squeal of car brakes, while the other believed it was the noise of sheep. Police began a search of the area, but found nothing. The 1,200-acre lignum swamps between the Murray and Gol Gol Creek were searched, with the aid of a bulldozer and 100 volunteers. There had been little rain in the area for 4 years, and the swamps were dried and little frequented by people. But someone had ridden a bicycle into the swamp. The tyre marks were found, and it appeared when returning the bicycle was lighter than before. Some objects were retrieved for examination, but proved unrelated to the case. Gol Gol Creek, a 3-mile-long watercourse used for irrigation and divided into sections by locks, was pumped out to check if the girl's body had been dumped in the water. The banks of the Murray were inspected from boats along a 10-mile stretch, and waterholes dredged for any clue. Footmarks resembling those of a child were found leading to dense mallee country at Tapio, 8 miles from Gol Gol, and this area too was searched. The scrub was so dense searchers needed to halt and check compass bearings, but once more nothing was found. Recently ploughed paddocks were checked, and the flight of crows was also being watched, in case they led to the corpse. On the 1st of September, a farmer named Kennan offered a reward of £100 for information about Valerie's whereabouts. The parents were suffering badly. George had scarcely slept since his daughter had gone missing, and Beatrice's health was severely affected. Beatrice in an interview stated that her daughter would not have wandered off by herself, but must have been forced or enticed away by somebody. George agreed, saying Valerie was afraid of the scrub. He didn't think she would willingly go anywhere with a stranger. It was also revealed that Valerie was a strong swimmer, unlikely to have gotten into difficulty in the river. Plaster casts of a man's footprints, which were found near Valerie's home, leading to the lignum swamp, were taken by police, but this was after weeks of searchers tramping through the area. It was revealed on the 6th of September that a girl had been seen walking along a lonely bush road with an elderly man near Kumiala, 20 miles from Gol Gol, 2 days after Valerie disappeared. Yet another search turned up nothing. Train passengers thought they saw something that looked like a child's body in a paddock near Oyen, 70 miles from Gol Gol, which proved to be a false report. Then, strangely, as criticism of the police began to be voiced, they altered their stance and became adamant that Valerie had wandered away and died in the bush of natural causes. It was by now being alleged that due to cross-border red tape, the police had wasted time in beginning a proper coordinated search for the girl. Wiley concluded Valerie had definitely not been the victim of foul play, but how he could know that for certain was not stated. On the 13th of September, almost 1 month since her disappearance, Sergeant Tracker Riley and his son arrived to see if they could discern anything at this late stage. Riley was considered one of the best trackers at that time. They were asked to check if tracks found earlier on Gol Gol Common leading to Arumpo Road could have been Valerie's. On the 21st of September, just as a £200 reward was posted by the state government, police got a tip that Valerie had been seen in the company of a man at Hopeton, 120 miles from her home. Yet again the promise of a solution to the baffling mystery fizzled out. After 8 months of searching, even the most resolute volunteer had to call it quits. Her father kept searching, though. In September 1947, the reward was raised to £300. The case suddenly came back into prominence in November 1948, when Harry Barker and his 15-year-old nephew, Jack Robertson, fishing in the Murray at Psyche's Corner, 2 miles from Gol Gol, found 5 strands of 8-inch-long auburn hair, the same shade as Valerie's, on their hook. Found snagged with the hair was a child's felt handbag cut in 2 and a handkerchief. Police reopened the case and a diver investigated the stretch of river, which was isolated with 15-foot deep water, but nothing further was found. The case was still open in 1954. That year a notorious pervert was questioned following release from Melbourne's Pentridge prison, but no arrest was made. In 1972, a farmer at Balcatherine, 45 miles north of Gol Gol, was working in his field when he uncovered a child's skeleton. Although indigenous burials had been located in the nearby area, a doctor who examined the bones was confident they were those of a white female, aged between 8 and 12. It was not Valerie, despite hope that the mystery had at long last been solved. There was no closure for Valerie's parents. Her father passed away at the age of 74 on the 7th of October 1961. Her mother was 83 when she died on the 22nd of August 1973. Decades after the disappearance, a man drove from Swan Hill to Mildura to inform members of Valerie's family that Valerie was still alive and had a family of her own in Melbourne. The number plates on his car were false, which raises questions, but his story was dismissed as that of a crank. Local writer Janelle Lee made a concerted attempt to get the mystery solved in 2010. Valerie was reinstated on the missing persons list and is today the oldest such cold case in New South Wales. Yet the mystery remains as impenetrable as the day in 1945 that she slipped into the dark corners of history.